Hello, my name is Dennis Löfgren, and this is Crash and Burn, a podcast about the challenges behind developing video games, produced by us here at Right Nice Games, a game studio located in Stockholm, Sweden. Making video games is a daunting task with a lot of complexities and layers to it, many of which might be a barrier for you to even get started making games. We started this podcast because we want a place to talk about our successes and failures so that you can learn from them. On this podcast, we will cover many different topics, from how to do certain aspects of game development to how to manage a team or how to find funding. I will be joined by the members of the team here at Right Nice Games and eventually some special guests to discuss these topics and provide an informative voice, encouraging you to follow your dreams. Today I'm talking to our CEO Kevin Martinez and business developer Mattias Liljeqvist about how the studio was formed and the development of our first game, Skylar Plux Adventure on Clover Island, which was released on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC in 2017. And now, without any further ado, let's talk about it. So, Kevin Martinez and Mattias Liljeqvist, how are you two doing today?
Hey,
We're good.
yeah, we're doing good.
That's great.
Hey, you're not. Who are you?
All three of us are part of Right Nice Games today, but none of us were here when it was actually founded. Kevin, talk a little bit about your relationship to the founders and how you got involved with the team to begin with.
Before the year 2015, I was working mainly in music. So I'm a musician, a music producer. In my earlier days back in high school, I studied programming. And I've always been interested in both games and computers. But in the year 2015, I was kind of tired of the music business. I wanted to try something new, and games came to my mind. I was thinking, maybe I can make music for games. I started attending game jams, like trying different networking outlets, so to speak. Basically trying to meet people that was working with games and find someone to start collaborating with. And then on a game jam, I met one of the developers that founded Right Nice Games just a month before me joining in.
I think it was before it was even a company, right?
They registered the company September 2015.
Yeah.
I came into the office situated in Future Games, the vocational education in Stockholm, which they were students in. That's how I met them, and also how I met the school. Mattias recently started working at Future Games at that time.
Yeah, Mattias, what's your story?
I started working with Future Games as a head of education around July that same year. Before that, I was working for 7 years as a networker and project manager, helping startup teams within tech, just boosting the educational kind of world in Stockholm. But I had kind of grown tired of that too. And I was feeling like education at that time wasn't really meeting in the industry in a modern, good way. And the only kind of form of education I still believed in was kind of the vocational one. And that's how I came in contact with the owners of Changemaker Education. And they could convince me that I should help them out with Future Games. So I did. I started meeting the students that in July was very happy after being part of the Swedish Game Awards with one of their student projects that they had done in February that same year.
So yeah, the SGA's Swedish Game Awards is a national competition for game development students in Sweden.
After getting so much love through the Game Awards, they confronted me and asked me how they could get more support from the school to actually finish it. And I made a plan with them, and we kind of tailored the whole education for the last year that they had, because I saw the passion they had with making this really beautiful, cool game. And yeah, so I started to make sure that they had everything they needed, from facility to equipment to a lot of advice about networking. And that's about when I met you, Kevin. Remember Leo, who just came back to me and was very excited. Hey, would it be okay to create a key to a guy that makes music? That was the first thing Leo said to me. And first I was like, what? Just let me introduce him. He wants to just make music and sounds for free for us. That's too good to be true. Are you serious? Yeah, but he has so much equipment, and he would like to be here with us. And I said, okay, I really need to meet this guy before. I will never forget that day in the hallway when I saw this energetic, very charismatic Kevin with his big wavy hair coming in and just with a big smile saying, "Hi, I'm Kevin Martinez." It was really cool seeing how you started integrating with the team and getting more and more responsibility.
So how did things go once you actually started working on the project?
I gave them a 2-week trial to assess my quality and way of working, basically my production value, so to speak, in order for them to decide on whether they wanted to work with me or not.
Yeah, you were very humble in the beginning.
It was very exciting because the game looked really good from the start. You could tell why they won that year's Swedish Game Awards. The art looked pretty amazing and it looked like a decent 3D platformer. Since it was my first game project, I had no true insight on how things should look like. I was unaware of the step-by-step process, and when I came in, I was very eager to try out the game and see what they had made up until then so that I could start making the music. I got a computer that I could loan from the school and started working with that, downloading the project, trying to understand how to load the game. The first challenge was, how do I even navigate in the game engine? And I started asking questions to them specifically, like, okay, what levels do you have? How can I play the game? And at that moment, when I asked them, they didn't really give me the answers either. It was like, well, we have a couple of different levels here and there. In this folder, you can check out all the levels here. So right from the bat, it felt like I had no idea what it meant to make a game. I just thought, okay, perhaps this is how you make games. This is it's not really clear if you have any levels or if they're ready or if they're not ready. Everything is organic in a way. Like you just have to double click a bunch of files and try to figure out what's going on.
But it was a good way. You came in a very good place where everybody really encouraged trying stuff out and just making mistakes and learning from them.
Some say heroes aren't born. Heroes are made. I guess cliches exist for a reason, because our hero is just in the making.
So Kevin, today you're obviously not only the sound guy and musician at Right Nice Games, but also the CEO. How did that happen?
What happened basically was that I learned more and more about the project, the team, and I also had ongoing discussions with Mattias and the school as an extension to that. So we discussed a lot of things, and I felt the team was in a hard place where they had just signed an agreement with a publisher. They didn't really have a solid plan for how they should release the game within the time frame that they had set up for the game. And I was kind of anxious about it because at that time I had my plans to move from Sweden to Canada in order to study at Vancouver Film School. So I was at that crossing between two roads, a road crossing. Should I stay as the musician for the project, create the music, and then say goodbye, good luck? Or should I pursue trying to help out the project by becoming their producer, trying to manage the project together with them, etc., and start having the communication with the publisher, like that role as manager for the project. And not the creative leader, but the actual, I don't know how to say.
Business leader.
The business leader for the company, because I felt that I had so much to give. The music entrepreneurship that I was working on before had really given me a lot of hopefully, I had a lot of ideas, at least, on how to pursue a creative project There are some similarities, between music and games and perhaps movies. So maybe I can become that person, because I was very interested in business development. And I asked Mattias, could we talk about this? Because I don't really know what to do.
But I remember that, and you had so many healthy questions, and you were relating so much to your background in music, and I remember those long conversations where you were really hesitant about, should I just do what I set out to do and then move on, just like you said, or is there something more here? And you started relating to so many experiences that kind of went bad, but at the same time helped you grow. It was a possibility for you to kind of not move to Canada and instead try to learn from everything happening through this project and this company now, this student company that was in desperate need of not only creating a game, but creating a company with a business. You had a foot in both worlds where you definitely were understanding the creative process and the other developers. You were a very fast learner when it came to what they were trying to do and what they wanted to do. But you also had a foot in understanding money and understanding that, this should actually lead to also a professional result where we could keep doing what we love doing. And those were the conversations we had, which I'm really kind of proud that you decided to not move. And, the offer of staying with us at Future Games and staying with the team and taking a bigger responsibility. It was a very big milestone. And I'm not sure if even this company would have released their first game, our first game in 2017, if you wouldn't have taken that decision to stay with us in Stockholm.
Yeah, I'm happy that the original founders actually let me in, that they had the faith in me actually being able to contribute, not having the same merits as they had.
Let Clover Mountain be a trial of your courage. Best of luck to you both.
At this point, you were in full force of developing the game. How did that go?
During development, we faced a lot of hurdles, a lot of challenges. The biggest one being how you should tackle the internal production in terms of how do you plan, how do you focus, like what do you focus on when working on this game? For how long can you experiment with the mechanic before you need to say, all right, this has to be what it is, and then move on? The second biggest challenge was how to communicate and collaborate with a publisher. Everyone was kind of new to game development, and game development tends to become, especially indie, but I think everyone can get personal sometimes. And it's hard to find, when you have discussions about things that should be changed or removed or added, it's hard to see where does objectivity and subjectivity start and end. What should you listen to and what can you take with a grain of salt, basically? Like when someone says this doesn't sound that good or this thing looks awful or whatever, how should you tackle that? Because sometimes people want to be straightforward and tell you what they really think about the game, and you might end up working with a publisher that is very honest. We had a publisher that really spoke honestly about what they thought. I think it was kind of a culture clash between Swedes, and we had a publisher from the Czech Republic. So their way of communicating about development differed a lot from how we communicate.
And the publisher, Grip Digital, they were already signed on to the project before you came on, right?
Yeah, so the agreement happened somewhere in between there, and I remember my first meeting with the publisher, which was one of the most scariest things that I've ever been in. Like, because I was, I felt that I was the new kid on the block, and I was like presenting myself as the new CEO for Right Nice Games. And I remember the first thing I told them, I have to be honest here. The deadline is unrealistic, so we need to push it.
It was glorious.
So that was my intro.
What was the original deadline?
So we released the game in June 2017. The original deadline was October 2016.
What was unrealistic? What was behind the project at the time?
It's hard to remember exactly what was behind, but how we calculated that probably wasn't enough time was that we had a period where we were working on the vertical slice to show in Game Developers Conference 2016. So we compiled data about our progress. We managed to create this amount of content for the vertical slice, and how big is the game compared to this vertical slice. So we just did the math basically and concluded that October is going to be very unreasonable for us to finish everything in time. So either we cut a lot of content from the game or we push the release date, probably a combination of both the worlds. So we ended up not unanimously telling the publisher that we need to push the release date. So it was just a math thing to understand that, yeah.
What was causing the need for a delay? You said there was a low output. Was that the problem or the unrealistic deadline?
It was an unrealistic deadline, rather. We had a kind of a very high expectations on a very small team. Like we were only one level designer, only one programmer, one environment artist, one character artist. And the ambitions was to create a near AAA title. So the thing with Skylar and Plux is that it's one of the pure examples of hybris. When like they got very high grades for creating the game. It was a short project. Was it 4 weeks?
Yeah, 4 weeks.
4 weeks student project. You don't count in all the time it takes to release something on Steam or do the certification process for console, etc., etc. It's just make a prototype look as good as you can and make it work on a specific computer that has one of the better graphics cards and Intel processors, etc. Make it work so that a jury can come in and try out the game and see if they think that your team has potential. So they got praised for being able to create a 3D platformer that felt polished. And the thing was that they crunched a lot in order to get there. And then when they decided to compete for Swedish Game Awards, then they put tons of hours in order to reach that deadline, which was lots of crunching. And they did that just out of pure passion, of course. They won the award for Game of the Year, Swedish Game Awards 2015, and also Best Execution in Art. They had the perfect recipe for thinking, hey, maybe we can do this by ourselves. Maybe we can do this for real.
This is it, Skylar. We saved the island. Well, what's left of it anyway. Ha! To think we'd be heroes.
Oh, is that what you think of yourselves? Gasp indeed.
So you got the game delayed. How did you spend that time? What was development like in those additional months?
Rigid planning, and we didn't live up to that plan. Then we went from there and tried to finish as fast as possible.
Did you have to cut things?
Yeah, we had to cut things that on some occasions weren't even started. It's really hard when you start out making games to estimate how long things will take, but you still need to ask the team, how long do you think this will take? So I asked them around, okay, so we have this arbitrary number of worlds that we want to create. So how long will everything take? How long time do we have? And we split that time. We started out working with one level, and then when we felt like it was kind of finished, we moved on to the next one, etc., etc. By the time where it was like a couple of months left, maybe 5 months left, we saw the game coming together. We had the first opportunity to actually try out the game as a whole, which is something that I would never want to do the same way again. I would like to be able to see the game in its more complete form much earlier, We had, this vertical production in a way. I'd like to work nowadays to have a bit more horizontal approach. Try to create the smallest idea, the minimum viable prototype in order for you to try out your game ideas, and then start building up your game idea from the inside and out rather than A, B, C, D, E, F, G approach, like a very linear progression.
Yeah, every part of the game doesn't have to be finished to allow you to see the big picture.
Yeah.
So your months, weeks, days away from the deadline, what's that like? The lead up to releasing a finished game for the first time?
We had to work a lot at the end. We felt that we were lagging behind in our schedule in order to release the game in time. At the same time, the team was very tired of the game. We have been overworking for longer periods of time. So the last 6 months, I think I worked 16-hour days every day, including weekends.
Yeah, you were working a lot.
I remember speaking with the creative director for Arrowhead, Emil, talking about we're working a lot, and and he told me one of the biggest insights he got from the first game is that you should make sure that you work so that you have energy to make the next game. You shouldn't be working in a way that means that you're not going to release another game ever in your life. And at that time, it was really difficult for me to take that in because I saw all the workload and I thought, we need to finish this. How can we ever reduce? So it was also like the kill your darlings part. We didn't really realize that in order for us to be able to work more healthfully, we needed to cut a lot more content, and we didn't want to do that. So we sacrificed our health instead, which in hindsight is, of course, something that is not really worth it. It only leads to yourself being burned out. I mean, if you need to work 16 hours per day in 6 months or so, you have a problem with the game. I mean, or the deadline is far too. But sometimes you get into these situations and you don't really know what to do. It's easy to talk about how you should tackle that. In the backseat, it's easy to say, oh, you shouldn't crunch, you shouldn't overscope, create a too big game. You should have more money if you, etc. But it's really hard when you're in that situation to prioritize in a way that doesn't mean that you'll sacrifice your health. So it was really rough. And another thing that was really hard for us, that we released the game simultaneously on several platforms. So that was crazy.
This is amazing. But what if my father finds out about all this?
Hey now, let's burn that bridge when we get to it.
So we're about to wrap up our first episode. Kevin, do you have any final advice?
Maybe try to talk with other developers and ask them if developers outside of your team thinks that the scope of your game is adequate for the team that you're having, for your team composition. Maybe not do simultaneous shipping on several platforms if it's your very, very first game, and if you don't have a clear-cut plan for it, or put adequate time in the end to actually make sure that the ports are good. You have to put, you need to make your due diligence before you decide on that. And even when you have decided on that, run that due diligence 3 times.
How about you, Mattias?
A very big learning kind of experience and just a first-time studio. To really try to figure out how everybody are doing and respect that the better everybody is doing, the longer you can do it and survive to the second and third game that is actually going to be the product in your company that's going to be making the real money. And so being there for each other, I think you guys were trying to take care of each other also. And that is probably what a lot of indie studios are struggling with as well. We're still humans, a group of people trying to develop something. Private life doesn't stop just because you have a hard deadline. So it's important to think about the health aspects, both the physical and the mental part of starting your indie studio.
And with that, it's time to end the first episode of Crash and Burn, a Right Nice podcast. You can find and chat with us on Twitter. I'm at Dennis_Löfgren, Kevin is at SE Kevin Martinez, and Mattias is at Mattias the Ludio. Please give us feedback by tweeting at or DMing the Right Nice Games Twitter at Right Nice Games. We also have a Discord server, the link for which you can find in our Twitter bio. That's it for this episode. Have a right nice day.